During coverage of the Nashville school shooting, a woman interrupted a Fox News report to make an impassioned plea for gun control measures. Let's listen to that.
I have been lobbying in D.C. since we survived a mass shooting in July. I have met with over 130 lawmakers. How is this still happening? How are our children still dying, and why are we failing them? Gun violence is the #1 killer of children and teens. It has overtaken cars. Assault weapons are contributing to the border crisis and fentanyl. We are arming cartels with our guns and our loose gun laws. And these shootings and these mass shootings will continue to happen until our lawmakers step up and pass gun safety legislation.
South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace joins us now to discuss. Welcome to Rising, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, Congressman Mace, you've been a staunch opponent of gun control measures in the past. After the Uvalde school shooting last year, you tweeted, "Passing laws that only limit law-abiding gun owners won't fix the problem." Now that we face another school shooting, do you hold the same position?
Well, I guess I would ask, you ask these questions every weekend after there are multiple deaths in Chicago where there is gun control. Yes, I am for the Constitution and protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. What I'm not for is unsafe communities, unsafe schools. This should be an issue that we look at nationally everywhere, and this is a huge problem. In fact, my kids practice at a field where there were over 30 shots last year fired in a parking lot next to a children's Little League baseball game, okay? And so this affects families everywhere across the country. But one of the things that we have to do is look at the research, look at the information, and understand why this is happening in our country. It's very clear the Nashville shooter yesterday was deeply mentally disturbed, mentally ill, and had major mental health issues. And so what are we doing to try to prevent someone who is a bad person trying to get a gun? Obviously, background checks, strengthening our background checks is one way to do that, and it is supported by the vast majority of Americans, whether you're Republican or Democrat. But in places where we have gun control, or we're talking about Chicago, for example, where you can't have a rifle like an AR-15, you're only allowed a 9mm pistol. Every single weekend, people, adults and children are getting shot and killed. But we don't talk about that in the mainstream press. We don't talk about those issues that are going on in Chicago. And it's a huge problem. You look where they have gun control in California, more gun control than any other state in the country, and yet they still continue to have mass shootings. Now, things that I'm for common sense measures to keep our communities safe. Was one of only a handful of Republicans last year that co-sponsored a Democrat bill called the Active Shooter Alert. I've looked at and questioned why we have multiple databases with criminal information when the FBI is doing a background check. Why is there not one database where you can know in 60 seconds where this is a bad guy trying to get a gun? We have so many tools and software and the ability to be on top of this issue and safety in our communities, but we can't talk about that because the fringes of both sides. We've got people that want to ban guns on one side. We've got people that don't want to ban them on the other. But very few people are willing to meet somewhere in the middle and find what is that common sense solution that will keep our kids safe and keep our communities safe and keep guns out of the hands of bad guys. And I've been working on this issue for a really long time, as a state lawmaker, now as a member of Congress, and it's deeply frustrating. The FBI, when they're doing a background check, they're only allowed to use a fax machine when talking to local law enforcement agencies. When Dylan Roof went to go get a gun and murder 9 Black church members at Mother Emanuel, that didn't need to happen.
I think you're so right to point to how much agreement there is across partisan lines on common sense gun reforms. And I think it's really important also to focus on why there are so many gun deaths in places like Chicago. Fewer than half, only 4 in 10 guns that are involved in killings in Chicago originate in Chicago. One of the problems that they are experiencing there is that weaker gun laws in nearby states account for the majority of sourcing for gun deaths in the state. Additionally, it is also the case that if you look at gun-related deaths across states in America, they're overwhelmingly concentrated in states that have much weaker gun laws. So I wonder what you make of that and how you would go about addressing the concentration of gun violence in a place like Chicago, given how many guns come from other neighboring states.
Yeah, I'm a very data-driven, research-driven person. So in the state of South Carolina, we have gun laws, we have open carry with a permit, concealed carry permit, et cetera. And we do have a significant number of people that are found with firearms illegally over the age of 21 to 39. But we don't charge and prosecute those individuals for the gun crimes that they are committing. And that's an issue that is prevalent in a number of different states. And I've gone to my state law enforcement division and asked for data on gun crimes, for example, and you just can't get it. And then when you do get it, they'll send you hundreds of pages of information that you then got to take a calculator and manually add up all of this data together, and it's not relevant, and it's not easy to get to, because we want to know why people aren't being charged with gun crimes. We need to understand why people that have charges on their record are able to go buy a gun even when they pass a background check. When in 2023 you have all this technology, you should know in 60 seconds whether this is a bad person trying to get a gun. And these are all things that people, whether you own guns or don't own guns, that's just a very common sense measure. And yet we can't even have this conversation in this country. We can't find that middle ground. And in fact, one of my colleagues in Texas, after Uvalde, Congressman Gonzalez, I mean, the party censured him for one of his votes that he felt was important to his community because of what happened there. And so we all take a different approach, but the minute that you want to talk about finding that middle ground, finding some common ground and common sense, you then get attacked by either side. And I see this as an issue on both sides. And I've been working on gun crime since I was a state lawmaker. I had a bill in the state legislature when I found out after Dylan Roof and after Parkland, Florida, that the state of South Carolina doesn't require all the different agencies that have criminal data, the court systems, the counties, the municipalities, SLED, state troopers. All these different agencies have different databases with criminal information, and they're not required to put it all in one place so that you can find out in 60 seconds what's going on with someone's criminal record. That doesn't exist in our state. It doesn't exist in most states. And that is a real problem when we're talking about strengthening background checks, when we're talking about getting guns out of the hands of people that will use them in mass shootings. And so it's a huge problem, but I think one of the things we can do is looking at our databases with criminal information. We're just unwilling to have that conversation. It's devastating, has devastating consequences in our country.
I want to shift gears just a little bit, talk about another issue you've been very vocal on. Recently, you've written and spoken out about the abortion issue, saying that you believe that the Republican Party, some voices in it being too extreme on the issue, hurt the party in the midterms, and that you think most people would support a more middle ground approach. Can you elaborate on your thinking here?
Yeah, this is a deeply passionate issue to me personally. I was raped at the age of 16. I dropped out of high school at 17. And just a few weeks ago, for example, there were 21 members of the South Carolina State Legislature that not only did they draft a bill, but they actually filed a bill that would criminalize women who had abortion and charge them with murder. And in the state of South Carolina, murder can mean execution. So you would, in a sense, the state, if it were to pass, and it'll never pass, thankfully, but they were going to give more rights to a rapist than the woman who had been raped. They were going to put women up for the death penalty who had abortions for any reason. And so you see these conversations happening and actual legislation being filed. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? This is not right. And certainly doesn't show any compassion to women. And we as Republicans, as a party, learn nothing from the midterm election if that is the playbook going forward. And in my issue, I represent a very purple district where independents outnumber Republicans and Democrats and independents outnumber the Republican Party 2-1 in my district. But the number one issue in my district right now is inflation. The number two issue is abortion. And our district went from mildly pro-choice pre-Roe v. Wade, and then it went to vast majority pro-choice after Roe v. Wade, because people can be pro-life but also not want the laws to change. And that's what we saw happening. And the Republican Party was tone deaf on this issue. It's going to hurt us in 24. It'll hurt our chances of winning the White House back. And we're going to be in a dogfight to win and keep the majority in 24 in the House. And I just don't understand why this is not an issue that is top of mind for lawmakers in D.C. and around the country that want to find that middle ground. the minute I start talking about birth control access for every woman, especially women that live in rural areas and don't have access to an OBGYN doctor, pro-life groups will stop talking to me. And that's what's happened to this conversation. And it's wild that this is where we are in 2023.
Representative Mace, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.